Now, I have to tell you, the problem of price transparency is at least a 15-year-old discussion with respect to online retailing. When the first online grocery efforts began in the mid-1990s, companies like Streamline and Peapod, there was quite a bit of sort of hand-wringing and wailing going on among grocers who were concerned that because they already employed geographical zone pricing, that putting prices online would expose their schemes to shoppers, and that this would somehow undermine their ability to charge the appropriate prices for items based on geography. Now, as it turned out, this did not destroy the supermarket business. So how do we understand transparency 15 years later when there's a mobile device involved, a direct conduit to the source of information? And do we understand this the same way for every class of goods, for every purchase situation, for every shopper? And I am looking for our clicker. Did I? Ah, there we are. So you already know enough about me. A quick word about RetailWire. It's a group discussion blog, RetailWire.com. I highly recommend it. I've been writing for them for 12 years, as does Carol, who I'll introduce in a moment. It's a fantastic place to find learned opinions about topical subjects in the retail industry. And I'm very flattered that they asked me to come here today. Here's what we're going to try and do. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the study. I'm going to race through this stuff pretty much because you're going to be able to download the report when you're done at your leisure and study it slowly. But I do want to get some of the highlights out. Then we're going to introduce our two panelists, Wes Woolbright from Safeway, who has a significant job as a lead decision maker on their pricing policies and mechanisms, and Carol Speakerman from New Market Builders, who is one of the bright light experts on retail practice, not only in the grocery business, but in other channels. And then hopefully you're going to have a lot of questions that we're going to do our best to field. All right, so the study was conducted in June. It was 284 executives and managers, and about half of them were from the retail wholesale trade. Others were managers in the supplier industry, or side of the industry. This URL, retailwire.com/page/10133, that's the download link. And if you don't make note of it now and you need to ask about it, I'll help you find it again later. But it's retailwire.com/page/10133, and that's available to any of you who like it. All right, so breakdown of the channel. Key findings, we're going to go through these in order. So rather than read them now and read them again, I want to make time, okay? So issues about pricing. What was the top concern of this group? Well, they're worried about price sensitivity on the part of consumers. Very appropriate. If you get it wrong, consumers are going to leave you in droves. The showrooming question, which is probably the thing that caused this study to take place, was next, but not an overwhelmingly frequent mention. So folks were worried, but not quaking in their shoes. And the normal activities that we make in retailing of promotions and competitive pressure came also as significant but not high-level concerns. I want to reference a couple of notes here while we're talking. So was there a channel difference? And I think this is probably something you might intuit on your own. Showrooming is a big worry if you're in the consumer electronics category. Maybe not such a big worry if you're selling milk. I know that's drawing a very broad comparison. But in fact, specialty hardlines by far the area in which there was the greatest concern expressed by these survey respondents. Luxury goods sort of following that, but interestingly, not so much clothing. And maybe there are other factors at work besides absolute pricing when shoppers make those decisions. So if you're on and offline, the natural question is, what about pricing consistency? Should I be posting the same prices on my website as I have in the stores? And that's the 15-year-old question that the grocer's worried about. It turned out to be not a big deal. Is it a big deal in other categories or in the modern context? And, well, there's still some folks who believe you always have to have the same price in all channels. That's almost half of this response grade. But others believe you price it differently as deemed appropriate. I tend to fall with the red side of this pie myself. I just think everything's situational, and if you can't deal with the complexity, it's kind of too bad because it's thrust upon you. Pricing practices. Now, this is where it kind of gets deep in the weeds. But if you have a large assortment of goods, there needs to be a systematic process. By the way, that's Wes's expertise. We're going to hear from him in a bit. But so do we match prices on every item with our competitors? Do we promote specifically depending on the channel we're in or to the person we're promoting to? In other words, how are we going to vary price if we're not going to just be the everyday low price leader on every item every day all the time? There's only one company that can do that. It used to be Walmart, but now it's who? Are you paying attention? It's probably Amazon most of the time in absolute price. Maybe not net landed delivered cost, but absolute price. And do we survey competitive pricing more intensely? So it's interesting that price matching is still considered an important tactic right now. I think that's also open to question. But remember, this is an attitude survey about executives that goes as far back as June, and that's ancient history almost in some respects. Physical and online presence. Do you align your prices online and off through all channels? Did I go backwards? Yes, I did. All right, assortment practices. Integrally intertwined with the pricing question is what do you sell? And very often, the difference in price between items in your line of merchandise is a significant factor on how prices are perceived. So do we look for custom SKUs as a way to separate your business from competitors? Now, who's bought a mattress recently from a department store? Probably nobody buys them from a department store anymore. Now, if you buy a certain brand that begins with an S, and there's more than one, so you can't guess which one I'm thinking of, you can probably get a mattress with a model number and a certain fabric cover that's identical to one you can get in another store with a different fabric cover and a different price. And there's no way to price compare those items. That's a custom product, a custom item. It's kind of sneaky, don't you think, as a shopper? But in fact, this is the proposition that comes up in this survey here. Related to that is a store brand program. If you sell your own items under your own label, no one else can sell them in competition with you. And so if the items are distinctive in some way, branding or attributes, that's possibly a way to work around the price comparison problem up to a degree. And then the endless aisle, which I've heard mentioned several times in presentations here at this event already, which is if you can't fit it all on the shelf, your Barnes & Noble, you can only sell 35,000 books, but your Amazon, you can sell 4 million titles, that is. Well, the endless aisle allows you potentially to play in that realm if you so choose and dare. Sorry, I keep going backwards. Finally, the customer experience practices. Top concerns, emphasis on the service experience. Now, I like to define this in terms of what makes a shopper successful. Systematic pricing process, sort of inherently into that methodology, is paying attention to the shopper response to price changes. So it's a form, if you will, of active attention to the shopper behavior that can be used to guide better decisions. So emphasis on the shopper's success from their own definition holds potential here in helping us make the right decisions. All right, pricing management approaches. There are other ways to improve your competitiveness in terms of the assortment, in terms of the experience, in terms of the kind of service levels. In each instance, there are pros and cons, very often category specific or target customer specific or both, where there may be opportunities to provide values that are more important in the instance than the last few cents of the price. And this is one of the areas where retailers work to try to decide what's right. Price optimization comes fairly high on the list in terms of methodologies. That's, in this case, empirical, model-based pricing systems. All right, a couple of headlines. This is November. Best Buy says the chain is open for showrooming. This was a kind of a declaration that Best Buy was not going to be intimidated by folks walking their aisles with smartphones, looking at products, and then ordering it online from, you name it, Rakuten or Amazon or anybody else who had the better deal. So Hugh Jolie said, once customers are in their stores, they're ours to lose. Anybody else feel that way? And I don't know how many in the room. In fact, I should ask this question. How many in the room are actually retailers, online or otherwise? That's most of you. OK. Very well. So I'm sure you're from different channels or categories of goods. Do you agree, and let's do this by show of hands also, do you agree that it depends on what you're selling? Do you agree, keep the hands up, do you agree that it depends on who you're selling to? All right, do you think it depends on what your competitor is doing? All right, interesting questions. That's my own instant poll. I can't even render an opinion about whether this is working for Best Buy or not. I sort of hope it is. They're the last man standing in the category. But is transparency, in a sense, openness, the solution for transparency? Don't fight it, go with it. Maybe that's a question to discuss later. Target's price match offer. This is another, I mean, is this a slogan or is this a real thing? Or we're going to match any price that you can come in here, any legitimate price you come in with. I'm not sure if, in fact, if you show them your mobile phone and says, see, here's the price I just looked up on a competitor site, is Target employee going to be empowered to give you that price on the spot? That's what this claim seems to imply. Has anybody actually done that in this room? Show of hands. See, I haven't tried it. And it actually might kind of be a pleasure to try and see if it works. So that's only January. And then here's a clincher. Macy's shoe salesman feels he's losing commissions because people are coming and trying on shoes and ordering them from, I think it might be a shoe store that begins with a Z. Ouch. I mean, if that's really true, that really hurts. I mean, the retailer might not care. Or what if they're ordering it just from the Macy's online site? Either way, the sales guy takes it on the chin. Is that fair that he should exert that effort and not have any of the benefit? Now, these are some of the practical problems that come up when we open pricing up to the public. But as far as I can tell, it's an unclosable door. So we're going to talk about that a little bit with our group today. So, all right, there's 3 points here that I think are interesting, and maybe it'll start off the conversation. Customers can be distracted from making head-to-head comparisons by a satisfying shopping experience. What do we think about the idea of distraction? How about thumbs up for yay, thumbs down for nay? Do you want to distract shoppers from noticing the price? I get a lot of thumbs down, well, and a lot of non-committals. All right. I think I'm with the thumbs down on that one, personally. Retailers need to constantly define processes and eke out greater efficiencies. That sounds like mother's milk to me. Is that going to help us in pricing? Yes, no? All right, everybody talks efficiency. And a good price image can be cultivated in radically different ways. Now, we haven't really talked about what we mean by a price image. There's a sort of technical, almost numerical answer to that. But we all kind of know what we think those two words mean. So let's sort of loosely define it as the impression that our prices are trusted by our shoppers. Is there only one path to get there, which is the lowest number, or are there other ways? Now, that answer I don't expect you to have, but I would propose that that's worthy of discussion at least today. So, all right, so here we are. Myself, Wes, and Carol. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them because they're very well qualified to address some of the issues that this whole discussion raises. Wes is the National Pricing Director at Safeway. And Safeway is, besides being an excellent supermarket operator, they're very innovative in a couple of ways. One is they use pricing optimization that is model-based, empirically based, routinely day-to-day to try to deliver the right prices in its stores. And that means not necessarily the same price everywhere for the same items. There are other factors that count. And the empirical process, by the way, involves paying very careful attention to what shoppers do when prices change. And that can only be done using technology tools. Wes also, if you recall, Safeway, those of you who know, have a Just For You discount program now that is a mobile app that's getting quite good response from the marketplace. So they're working with price on the custom level as well as the price that's posted on the shelf. Fascinating. And he's an actual professional pricing society. Carol Speakerman, she's the president and CEO of New Market Builders. And besides being a very significant contributor to the RetailWire, she really is an expert on many other things retail, and not just in the grocery channel, in fact, in many of the other channels. She is an excellent thinker on this subject, and it's my pleasure to have them both here, and it's worthy of a quick clap anyway. So we prepared a couple questions to start things off, but I want to make it clear to the audience that your questions are probably more important than these. And then we'll kind of begin. I realize I need to sort of stand here to see the screen. Well, I guess I don't. I can look at that one there. All right. I want to come sit here. I feel like we should be more democratic. So what do we think? I think, is showrooming something to be encouraged, as Best Buy proposed? Is there a pitfall in it? Why don't we start, Carol, with you?
I think retailers, by and large, from everything I'm hearing, are actually going beyond that. Showrooming, showrooming is a really simplistic term that implies that things are a lot simpler than they are. And I think a lot of retailers are embracing showrooming, but more specifically embracing the unique role that the store plays in their portfolio. It wasn't that long ago that having physical stores was considered to be a liability. Everyone said, oh, Amazon's more nimble, digital spaces are where it's going, and even that physical retail was heading for a fall and going to go away. And I think that's been dispelled quite a bit. But now retailers are looking at the unique role that stores play and the unique advantage that they offer as part of their overall strategies. So, I always like to sort of reframe things to where they're not necessarily so simplistically stated. And where we see things going is that it isn't necessarily price sensitivity, but it's more skepticism. When you talk about that price perception, a lot of retailers are saying we're dealing more with skepticism than anything, which is about trust. And once you overcome that skepticism, then you're not necessarily, you realize you're taking the veil off and you're not necessarily dealing with that many price-sensitive folks out there. And also probably one of the biggest points where this is heading and where I hear a lot about now and where it's going next is that it's not just about price, it's about policy. One retailer recently told me, I put it very succinctly and very well, I think, when he said, we need to develop new policies that address the new realities. And that means not just coming up with your own apps, but also talking about ways that you realistically, your store associates and everyone else can deal with third-party apps, and what your policies are when your customers come to you with these challenges and these price challenges. So I think there's a lot of nuance in there, and then I'll just throw in one other piece that we talk a lot about multi-channel and omni-channel. We're talking more about transmedia. And it's a subtle difference between not thinking of people engaging on multiple channels or in any sort of a linear path, but thinking in terms of them simultaneous engagement and what that means. And that subtle distinction between multiple versus simultaneous, I think, really gets to the heart of the challenge, the fact that people could be looking at 5 different price propositions at the same time, not in a sequence.
Fascinating. Well, Wes, you come from a different side of the retail industry. Where does showrooming fit in your concerns at Safeway?
No. Not really. On a couple levels from a supermarket perspective. One is that the price is just so low to begin with. A lot of it, perishable product you want now, so there's a time element. And I think what's really, in terms of effective showrooming, if you will, if you were to be an e-tailer with that kind of policy, is it would have to be something probably significantly large dollar to begin with a large savings opportunity to the customer. And those are both factors that don't really apply to Safeway. To echo some of Carol's thoughts in terms of policy, I think where Macy's shoe sales people got in trouble is the technology got ahead of the policies. Nobody really thought, what is it going to do if we migrate sales to online? What's that going to do to our associates who are really key to the sort of brand, and you have to merge those two together. A couple other thoughts that I think some fallacies in the question are, if you're an e-tailer, you're always going to be the lowest cost. You really don't want to create a situation where you push somebody into another enterprise and find out that the basis for pushing them there you actually didn't deliver on. And then secondly, it's not just about price. Customers factor a whole lot more into their buying decision than just the price. And I think the risk you run in pushing them into a brick and mortar context is they get to experience some of those other benefits there that they may not even be aware of, much less experiencing if they're doing it in their comfort in their own home. And to that point, the survey mentioned Amazon, or you mentioned Amazon is lower than Walmart, but a lot of studies have been done that Amazon's not the lowest price online e-tailer, but they are able to charge more because I think there's a level of trust with the Amazon brand that some of the lesser knowns don't have the benefit of. So again, it's not about price, it's about what am I getting for that price, and there are some factors beyond what I pay.
Do you think Amazon may occasionally be the victim of showrooming itself?
More than likely, and I think where they suffer from that is you can showroom much more quickly in an online environment than in a brick and mortar environment, because you can pull up, to your point, 4 or 5 different companies and offerings, and if you're really a price-driven consumer, make the decision more quickly that way.
In the audience, are there any thoughts about showrooming that you feel this conversation overlooks? Does it affect your businesses in a way that maybe you might not have expected? We have a calendar in the front. See, this is role reversal, by the way. I'm asking questions of you. But whatever gets us started. All right, so here's an interesting issue. The pricing consistency question. Is it more important? And we saw one of the survey results, if you remember, there was some concern about matching price across channel. So is pricing inconsistency a red flag to shoppers, or is it actually a strategy that says that you as a retailer are delivering the appropriate price to the appropriate individual on the appropriate occasion? So there's a message in the price, in other words. So what should omni-channel retailers do? Safeway's online as well as in store.
I think if you're comparing your online price presence to your brick and mortar price presence, you're heading off on the wrong path to begin with. It's really about the shopper, it's about the customer. If you have different customers, just as you would in a physical sense, or if you're a pure play e-tailer, you might actually offer different prices to different online retailers. It's the same strategy. What you are supposed to be doing to be a successful retailer, online or otherwise, is addressing customers' needs. And if your customers' needs in an online context are better met at one price point, and they're better met in a brick and mortar context because it's a different customer, then the smart thing to do is to address those differences. If it's the same customer in both places, and that customer is somebody who's going to lose faith in you or walk away because they see you being inconsistent, then of course the right thing to do is to maintain consistency across the channels.
Right. So that begs the question, how do you tell? Which instance are you dealing with certain shoppers? Are there practices you try to put into place to get a handle on that?
A lot of it is research, consumer research. I think typically there are if you will, a niche of consumers that are more comfortable shopping from home, whether it's because they're time-strapped or they just feel comfortable shopping in their pajamas, if you will, as opposed to going to a mall or going to a Safeway to pick up what they're after. But part of the price equation, again, in terms of their solution is they're pricing to how does the environment, if you will, most relevant to me. I mean, I think you made mention of the fact that you enjoy going shopping, and going shopping with your wife is an enjoyable experience. Some people don't get that, and therefore, if they can avoid what for them is uncomfortableness, they may be willing to pay more online. Similarly, they may be expecting that because it's an online environment, it should be at a discount to a brick and mortar situation.
You know, one thing I'll add to that is, you know, I really like what Walmart did in this regard. They you know, their ad match program with their ubiquitous ads with the guy, you know, walking through the store with a shopper that I'm sure you've all seen. It's a deceptively simple but very, very effective campaign on many levels. First of all, Walmart, by doing that, actually by default created an exception-based pricing policy. In other words, they put it in the shopper's hands to call out when they thought Walmart was in any kind of a violation, if you think about it. So instead of trying to figure out how to keep prices sort of lower, lower, lower for every single possible shopper that might have a price objection, instead they made it incumbent upon the shopper to come to them with a receipt and saying, hey, this is lower. And when you think about that, that's pretty ingenious. First of all, you're able to quickly identify who has the price sensitivity, and you're not assuming that everyone has a price sensitivity. And then the ads that they ran along with it ended up becoming wildly successful. Very simple ads, cheap to shoot too. Some of the cheapest campaigns they've ever run by shooting in local stores, getting that authenticity point by using real shoppers, interviewing real shoppers in real store environments, shooting those spots locally. Check another box, localization. And again, making it an exception-based execution piece on the back end when customers would have to actually come out and show a receipt. And I just think all in all, those are some surprising outcomes, multiple outcomes from a very simple campaign that speaks to one way to address that on an exception basis rather than just assuming, you know, this paranoia that everybody's very, very price sensitive.
There's a lot of research that backs up that offering a price match guarantee costs very little because very few people actually do opt in, but it has tremendous value in terms of building a low price perception image.
Well, and going back to the point that I talked about earlier, it converts the skeptics. Mm-hmm. So you're not dealing necessarily with price sensitivity, you're dealing with skepticism. And if you can run campaigns that mitigate skepticism, then you'll probably find that a lot of the so-called sensitivity goes by the wayside.
Well, fantastic. Believe it or not, we have used up our allotted time. There are probably more questions. I certainly have some. But since we have break after this, I'll be happy to hang around a little bit in the back of the room for anyone who wants to have further discussion. Let's join me in thanking our panelists. Great help. And if anybody needs a repeat of that URL, I don't remember if it's on our final slide or not.
Also, too,
yeah, there it is.
He mentioned RetailWire. For those of you in social media on Twitter, they put out a lot of great retail insights across a lot of different categories. So if you follow @RetailWire, you'll get some really great updates on what's going on from a lot of different perspectives.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm very delighted that the audience got bigger as we kept talking. So maybe we went viral. I don't know.
That's that post-break time slot, I think.
So thanks very much, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.